Katie Couric. On the eve of a high-stakes summit, President Bush blames the violence in Iraq on al-Qaeda and insists U.S. troops won't go home until the job's done. And the Baker-Hamilton Commission is ready to recommend a timetable not for U.S. troops to withdraw, but for Iraqi troops to take over. The Pope goes to Turkey and tries to mend fences with the Muslim world that may not be ready to forgive. And overweight in America. Tonight, our special series looks at grossly overweight teenagers. Is surgery the answer?
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Hi, everyone. President Bush is at the NATO summit in Latvia, where he's been pushing the allies for more troops for the war in Afghanistan. But the focus is about to shift to the war in Iraq at another summit, this one in Amman, Jordan, where Mr. Bush will be meeting starting tomorrow with the Iraqi Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki. It is all about the future of Iraq, including the thousands of U.S. troops serving there. CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Jim Axelrod is with the president in Latvia. Jim?
Well, Katie, a senior administration official tells me that when President Bush sits down with Prime Minister Maliki, it may be Maliki who pushes for troop withdrawals so Iraqis can take greater control of their own security.
My questions to him will be, what do we need to do to succeed? What is your strategy in dealing with the sectarian violence?
In Latvia, for the NATO summit today, the president firmly repeated a longtime pillar of his strategy, ruling out bringing troops home.
But there's one thing I'm not going to do. I'm not going to pull our troops off the battlefield before the mission is complete.
A call from Maliki for repositioning troops would be a different matter. But heading into the summit, Mr. Bush seems to be looking back as much as looking forward, recycling old claims that outside terrorists are to blame for the chaos in Iraq.
There's a lot of sectarian violence taking place, fomented, in my opinion, because of these attacks by al-Qaeda, causing people to seek reprisal.
Meanwhile, in Washington, the Baker-Hamilton Commission continued its work, hoping for a report by early next week. Today, Mr. Bush adamantly rejected what's expected to be a key recommendation, engaging Iran and Syria for help calming Iraq. He says that's up to the Maliki government.
Iraq is a sovereign nation which is conducting its own foreign policy. They're having talks with their neighbors. And if that's what they think they ought to do, that's fine. I hope their talks yield results.
The results yielded today were not what the president wanted. Iraq's President Talabani was in Iran, listening to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, blame the United States for all the chaos in Iraq. Katie?
Jim, why does the White House continue to be so adamant about not dealing directly with Iran?
Well, President Bush has drawn a line in the sand with Iran about its nuclear program, saying Iran must verifiably suspend all enrichment before talking with the U.S. about anything. Having Iraq takes the lead allows the conversations to proceed. In effect, Katie, it allows the U.S. to talk about it without really talking about it.
Jim Axelrod traveling with the president tonight. Bringing Iran into the process may not be the only recommendation from the Iraq study group that gives this administration pause. There is also the issue of timetables. The president has repeatedly dismissed the idea of setting a schedule for withdrawing U.S. troops. But David Martin has learned the commission may have found a way around that by putting the onus on the Iraqis.
Sources close to the Iraq study group predict its final report will not call for a timetable for the withdrawal of American troops, which would almost certainly be rejected by the Bush administration. Instead, these sources expected to recommend a timetable for the Iraqi government to assume greater responsibility for its own security. Still unresolved is the question of what, if any, consequences there would be if the Iraqi government failed to meet the timetable. The study group is drafting its recommendations just as the Bush administration is acknowledging the war has entered a new phase. But CBS consultant and former CIA analyst Michael Scheuer thinks it's worse than that.
I'm not so sure it's a new phase, David, as it is just a recognition of Iraq being basically out of anyone's control at the moment.
The Shiite militia behind much of the violence has vastly increased in size in the past year and is now estimated by U.S. intelligence at 40 to 60,000. Between 1,000 and 2,000 of them have traveled through Syria to Lebanon for training by the Iranian-backed terrorist group Hezbollah. And thousands more have received training at camps inside Iran. But U.S. intelligence officials say even a complete cutoff of Iranian assistance would not end the violence, which raises this question.
Do you think anyone can bring this sectarian violence under control?
I don't think it's possible. Certainly it's not possible by the United States.
The study group had hoped to reach agreement on its major recommendations today, but it has broken up for the night and will have to meet again tomorrow. Katie?
David Martin at the Pentagon tonight. Richard Haass is president of the Council on Foreign Relations and a former advisor to Secretary of State Colin Powell. Richard, the president said today that al-Qaeda is basically responsible for the sectarian violence in Iraq. Do you buy that?
In a word, no. It's clearly responsible for some of it. It's clearly exacerbated some of it. But even if al-Qaeda disappeared tomorrow, which we all would love, the sectarian violence would continue. There's Iraqis on both sides of this, or on multiple sides of this, that are doing plenty of the fighting on their own.
The president also said, quote, he's not going to pull our troops off the battlefield before the mission is complete. What does that mean? Is it realistic?
If by the mission being complete, the president means somehow making Iraq into a normal country and a functioning democracy, I think that's wildly unrealistic, I'm sad to say. There's not going to be a completion of the mission. There's not going to be success. There's not going to be something that's going to be a model for anything in the Middle East.
For some time, the president seemed to exhibit more flexibility vis-a-vis the situation in Iraq, more openness, if you will. Today, he seemed to dig in his heels again. Why?
I noticed that as well. The president understands how much his presidency, how much history is going to judge him by how the United States fares in Iraq. But I believe we're getting very close to that point where we have to cut our losses and then perhaps think in American foreign policy, what do we do to offset the failure? What can we do elsewhere to show that the United States can still be effective, can still be successful?
Have you come up with the answer?
At the end of the day, Iraq, as expensive as it is, as important as it is simply one square on the global geopolitical chessboard. We can't afford to put all of our pieces on that one square. The United States has other things that matter. And if, as it looks, Iraq is not going to turn out well, we need to begin to think, how do we reduce our losses there, and how do we try to invest elsewhere and then have something more positive to show for it?
Richard Haass, thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie.
Now, not everyone likes the idea of tomorrow's summit in Jordan, especially supporters of the radical Shiite cleric you've been hearing so much about lately, Muqtada al-Sadr. In fact, they've threatened to pull out of Iraq's coalition government if the meeting even goes on. That would be a major blow to the future of the country. But who is Muqtada al-Sadr, and how did he become so powerful? Here's Elizabeth Palmer from Baghdad.
Muqtada al-Sadr may dress like a simple Shiite cleric, but he's a politician and a warlord, commander of a militia called the Mahdi Army. Intelligence estimates say it's grown 8-fold in the past year alone to some 60,000 men. Al-Sadr is the 30-something heir to a religious dynasty. His grandfather's picture is pasted all over the Shiite neighborhood in Baghdad, which bears the family name, Sadr City. And today, thousands of his followers marched to commemorate the murder by Saddam's assassins of his father, a Grand Ayatollah. Muqtada himself has only basic religious training. Married but childless, he keeps his private life away from the camera. But he flaunts his ferociously anti-American message, which boils down to, get your troops out. It's not only that message that appeals to Iraq's Shiite majority, many of them poor and powerless. Last Thursday, when bombs in Sadr City killed more than 200 people, al-Sadr's organization raced to the rescue with first aid, crowd control, and the next day, compensation. But there's a darker side to the Sadr loyalists. They've taken over important government ministries, infiltrated the U.S.-trained Iraqi police, and his gunmen are also said to run the death squads that torture and murder Sunnis. Sadr has also consolidated his power in Iraq's parliament. His loyalists occupy the 30 crucial seats that give Prime Minister al-Maliki his majority. To understand what it all adds up to, consider this. When American forces encircled Sadr City a few weeks ago to look for a kidnapped U.S. soldier, al-Sadr called a meeting with the Prime Minister. The very next day, U.S. forces were ordered to leave Sadr City. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Baghdad.
And one final note on Iraq tonight. U.S. forces are still searching for the pilot of an F-16 that crashed yesterday near Fallujah. The wreckage was immediately surrounded by insurgents, and by the time American rescuers got there, the pilot was missing. Videotape shot by a local journalist appeared to show a body near the plane, but the U.S. military can't confirm whether the pilot is alive or dead. And this program note, we'll be reporting to you the next 2 nights from Amman, Jordan, on the Bush-Maliki summit about the future of Iraq. There is much more CBS News straight ahead. And coming up next, the Catholic Pope in Muslim Turkey. Can he ease the anger over his speech about Islam?